Hello Zero Books readers, it's me again, Douglas Lain, and this video will explore the philosophical concept of contradiction from Hegel as I embrace the secular saint and movie star Bill Murray. Back in June of 2016, I wrote a script for the popular YouTube channel Wisecrack entitled The Philosophy of Bill Murray. The video explored how Murray had gone from being a cast member on SNL, to being a movie star, to being at the center of a new, tongue-in-cheek, quasi-religious movement. At the time, I zeroed in on Murray's rumored association with the early 20th century mystic Gurdjieff and the occult practice known as the Fourth Way, in order to explain why it was that Murray's interaction with his fans had a peculiar but charming character. Stories of Murray photobombing weddings, crashing house parties and karaoke parties, and generally inserting himself into the everyday lives of everyday people had been covered by the New York Times, the New Yorker, Rolling Stone, and a variety of blogs and websites like BuzzFeed and Cool Material. It was a fun project and fairly easy to write because if I were to ever join an esoteric cult, I'd either hone in on the cult of Bill Murray or apply for membership in the Church of John Coltrane.
Dobbs? The message is now part of and registered in your subconscious mind. Every time you say, see, hear, or think,
Dobbs?
that's your key phrase. It will trigger the entire message without your being aware of it. It will signal your subconscious mind, flashing a message.
Now, as a would-be Marxist materialist, I shouldn't have this fascination with Bill. I should categorize Murray's wisdom teachings right alongside the insights of Jim Carrey, Gary Shandling, Harry Dean Stanton, or even Shirley MacLaine.
Ultimately, there's no I that has anything to do with it.
After all, if my initial understanding of what the cult of Bill Murray is about was correct, then what this cultural phenomenon represents is the ascendancy of some sort of pop culture version of the occult, and as such, it would be worthy of critique. In his book Dispirited, the philosopher David Webster critiques mysticism by pointing out that the way of the mystic stands against life and reality. According to Webster, the mystic worships a negation, or a total abstraction. He wrote, "The pantheistic mystical monism of the spirit is worse than 1,000 theologians. It threatens to become a moving target, assumed to be true in a way that religious faith can only dream of, and it offers to maintain what is negative in religion while jettisoning much of value, like concerns for truth, social justice, and engaged living." It's that word spirit that trips me up, I think, because I'm not sure that my understanding of the world can function without that word or that idea. What is this purely negative spirit that Webster and most rational leftists want to deny?
Hegel thinks that the most important event in human history, simply the single biggest thing that ever happened to us, is the extended transition from long-standing traditional forms of life to distinctively modern ones. And he introduces and develops an original conception of the subject of this great sea change, what he calls Geist Spirit. Geist is us as discursive beings, knowers and doers, and it includes all our norm-governed doings, thinkings, sayings, practices, and institutions, and all of their products.
The word Geist in German doesn't really have an exact English equivalent, but let's say it means both ghost and mind, or ghost mind. Put this way, it's easy to see why people don't want to believe in the spirit or in spirits. But I think if we understand this ghost mind properly, we might be willing to not only believe in it, but also to understand that it isn't something that is automatically present, something we're born with in our heads, but rather something to aspire to or to become.
But what Hegel is after is describing the universal phenomenon of the self's own self-consciousness, consciousness of being, as that unfolds. Well, and when he gets to absolute spirit, the section for today, then you get to the third phrase, you see, the absolute consciousness of being. Now, the closest you can get to that in theological language of Judaism or Christianity would be to talk of God's own knowledge. And from Augustine and Thomas Aquinas onwards, theologians have indeed talked of the knowledge of God, not just in our sense of our knowing God, but in God's sense of God's knowing, and God's knowing himself, God's self-knowledge. You see. Now, inasmuch as Hegel is process metaphysician, you see, he's thinking of God's self-knowledge, not of God as evolving, but of God's self-knowledge as being objectified in the world he's creating, you see, in the course of the unfolding history of the universe. And he sees God's self-knowledge as unfolding in our self-knowledge, first of all, subjective spirit.
Our God doesn't operate that way.
I am God. You are God. We are all God.
The clip you just saw was from a philosophy class taught at Wheaton College. Wheaton is an explicitly Christian liberal arts college in Illinois, and the professor seems to be leading his students towards a Christian interpretation of Hegel. However, there is something fundamentally true about this explanation of Geist, or spirit mind. That is, according to Hegel, the spirit isn't a static substance, but a process of self-understanding. God, for Hegel, isn't a thing set apart from the world, but the unfolding of self-understanding in the universe. And this essentially religious and entirely abstract cosmology is, I think, central to at least my own version of Marxism. The aim of a radical left politics should not be to merely understand this absolute unfolding of history as something external to ourselves. We're not called upon to be mere observers or spectators to history, but rather the aim is to take responsibility for our own becoming, or to shape history through a process of self-understanding. Now, you're probably wondering at this point what any of this has to do with Bill Murray.
You told a story last night about getting in a cab in Oakland and the guy telling you, the cab driver telling you that he played saxophone, and then you having him pull over, him getting in the back, you driving the cab, and him playing sax all the way across. Now, that's not something I would do. I mean, now maybe I would do it, but it's symptomatic, emblematic of how I've seen you over the last 35 years. I'm just curious how that came about, or how you see it.
It's a wonderful question, and when you say a conscious decision, you know, when I'm conscious, it is a conscious decision. It really is. And I've sort of, you know, the only reason I've had the career life that I've had is that someone told me some secrets early on, you know, about living, and that you just have to remind yourself. You have to remember yourself, and it's such a powerful reminder to realize it's going to be, 14 feet high someday. You know, it's sort of like it's like an echo saying, this is it, Bill. You've got to remember now, And I guess that's when you come into a funny situation, like getting into a taxi with a guy who's a saxophone player. I said, when do you practice it? I don't know. I drive like 14 hours a day or something like that. Well, where's your sax? He said, it's in the trunk. I was like, that's 2 and 2. It makes 4. So pull over and get in the trunk, and I know how to drive a car. Not only did he play all the way to Sausalito, which is a long ways, we stopped and got barbecue. He was playing like it's some kind of, what people would call like a sketchy rib place in Oakland at like 2:15 in the morning. And it's like, relax, man, you got the fucking horn. We're cool. And he was blowing the horn, and like, crowd's like, what the hell? Look at the crazy white dude playing that thing. And it was great. It made for a beautiful night, and, we've done that. And I think we'd all do that. I think anyone, if you saw that moment, you'd say, like, and you're, as they say, available, you'd see it, you make the connection, and you do it right.
A commenter on one of our recent videos said that my explanation of the material basis of capitalism amounted to an intellectualized, step-by-step set of instructions towards mindfulness. Or at least that's what I remember. Now, mindfulness as a thing, let's say as a commodity for sale in the world, isn't something I want to be too involved in. I'm not much into Western Buddhism or karma or any of that. On one level, I actually agree with David Webster. When we hold on to this abstraction of being as an object, when we use it as an excuse to leave the world alone and to retreat, we're making a mistake. But I do think that if we can relax and engage our brain, then we're on our way to self-understanding. So in that vein, I want to say something obvious. Clearly not everyone can afford to pay their cab driver to play saxophone all day. Obviously not everyone can light up a room or shift the ordinary into something extraordinary and significant just by walking in. Being Bill Murray is no answer for the problem of existence. Bill Murray isn't universal. His brand of ironic detachment and cool isn't the absolute. But maybe we don't need it to be. One of the difficulties we're stumbling up against these days, one of the blocks or impediments to self-understanding maybe, is this contradiction between the collective and the individual, or the universal and the particular. So when I say there's a contradiction between the individual and the collective, what I'm saying is not only that these are antonyms, but also that they are self-reinforcing. That is, Bill Murray, as an individual, is exactly what his collective fan base is not. But he can only operate as Bill Murray in relation to the collection of his fans, and his fans can only exist in relation to him. But what's fundamentally interesting about Bill is that he knows this, or at least every once in a while he knows this. And when he becomes aware of this relationship that makes up his being, he's freed from it. He's free to change it up, or to use it in order to change that relation. Here's the story of Bill Murray. He approaches a group of people as somebody important, and then, magically, acts in a way that allows his fans to be important too. He helps to instantiate their individuality, if only for a moment. He uses his celebrity to do this, even as he gets rid of his own celebrity. And this is how Bill manages, despite everything, to have a good time. Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.